In every age, truth hides behind the walls we build to protect our comfort. And in our communities, few walls are taller than the ones built around lineage, honor, and the myths we inherit without ever questioning their origins. This podcast is not here to soothe you. It is here to confront you, to expose the systems that masquerade as religion, the customs that suffocate lives in the name of tradition, and the silent injustices we have normalized for generations. Welcome to The Missing Dots, where we connect the truths others fear to touch, and where every episode forces you to ask, if the foundations of our beliefs are cracked, why do we keep building on them?
Yeah, if you are sitting there listening to this right now, you probably already feel the weight of this restriction. It just sits so heavily in, so many homes today.
It really does. Looking at all the historical research and the legal texts we gathered for today, we are really focusing on this deeply ingrained cultural rule. You see it a lot in South Asia, parts of the Middle East, and, well, anywhere those communities have settled, really.
Right, yeah. It is this widespread belief that a Sayyida, so a woman who is a direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad, is strictly forbidden from marrying a non-Sayyid man.
Exactly. And, there's this prevailing idea that if she marries outside that specific verified bloodline, the marriage is somehow invalid, or that it is a sin, or just this permanent stain on the family's honor.
Yeah, which is huge. So our mission today is just to look at this slowly,
Yeah.
We want to separate actual divine revelation from, human-made social systems.
Right, because if you have been told your whole life that this is a strict religious law, we want to walk you through what the Quran actually says, and how the Prophet's own family lived, and how classical law handles this.
Because if we want to know something is a genuine Islamic requirement, we have to start at the ultimate baseline, right? We have to look at the Quran and the authentic Sunnah.
Yeah, that is always where we start. So I just want to jump right in. When you look at the actual text, like the Quran itself or the authentic Hadith collections we have here, what is the explicit rule about a Sayyida marrying outside her lineage?
This is usually the most jarring realization for people who grew up with this custom. There is absolutely zero text.
Right, is there?
None. You can search the entire Quran, you can search the authentic, mass-transmitted Sunnah, and you will not find a single line that forbids a Sayyida from marrying a pious Muslim man outside her lineage.
But let me just stop you there, because, if you ask any family enforcing this today, they will say it is an absolute religious mandate. Are you telling me that in all these volumes of Hadith, there is not even, a footnote supporting a ban?
There is no ban at all. Actually, the texts we have actively dismantle this kind of hierarchical thinking. If you read Surah Al-Hujurat, specifically verse 13, it is very clear.
That is the verse about nations and tribes, right?
Yeah, exactly. It explicitly states that Allah made humanity into nations and tribes so that they may know one another. And it says, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous.
Ah, so the measure is taqwa, piety.
Right. It completely removes biological bloodline as any sort of measure of a person's spiritual worth or social superiority.
So that verse essentially acts as a constitutional amendment for human equality. It just levels the entire playing field.
It really does. And the Prophet reinforced this exact principle in his farewell sermon. He stood before thousands of people and made a declaration that completely dismantled pre-Islamic tribal arrogance.
Which is the concept we call Jahiliyyah.
Yes, Jahiliyyah. He said very clearly that an Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, and a white person has no superiority over a black person except by piety and good action.
It is such a complete rejection of the idea that your DNA makes you better than someone else. So when it comes specifically to the mechanics of marriage, what did he tell the community to look for?
Well, he gave very clear guidance to guardians. He said, if there comes to you one whose religious commitment and character pleases you, then marry your daughter to him.
Just those two things?
Just those two. Deen, which is religious commitment, and Khuluq, which is character. He never, at any point, added a third criteria about having the right surname or, matching tribal nobility.
Okay, I hear that, but I want to push back gently here on behalf of the families who enforce this. Because they will say, look, we are doing this out of a profound love for the Prophet-or.
Sure, yeah. That is a common defense.
Right, they ask, doesn't honoring him mean honoring his bloodline? How do our sources reconcile that genuine reverence with this strict restriction? Because honestly, they feel they are protecting something sacred.
It is a very natural human feeling to want to honor that lineage. We all carry a deep love for the Prophet. But the scholars in our research point out something crucial.
Which is what?
That true reverence for him is actually following his explicit commands. He commanded the community to judge people by their character and their devotion to Allah. Right.
So when a family rejects a deeply pious, righteous man simply because he, lacks a specific genetic lineage, they are actually treating blood as a biological superiority. They prioritize DNA over the very piety that the Prophet said was the only thing that matters.
SubhanAllah, that is a really powerful distinction. Honoring his legacy means obeying his principles, not just isolating his genetics.
Exactly.
So, okay, if the scripture commands this kind of equality, it naturally makes me wonder how his own household applied it. Like, did they practice strict lineage matching behind closed doors?
History is probably the best mirror we have here, and the historical record we are looking at completely contradicts the modern cultural rule. The Prophet himself arranged and approved marriages for his own daughters with men who were outside his Hashemite lineage.
Wait, really? With non-Sayyid men?
Yes. So Ruqayya and Kulthum, they were both married to Uthman ibn Affan, and Uthman was from the Umayyad clan, not the Hashemite clan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Zainab, his eldest daughter, she married Abu al-As ibn al-Rabi, who was also an Umayyad. Okay, if you are listening right now, just stop and think about that for a second. The Umayyads and the Hashemites had a lot of tribal rivalry before Islam.
Oh, massive rivalry, yeah.
So the Prophet, the one who established the law, didn't just marry his daughters outside his lineage, he married them into a different clan entirely, because he valued the character of those specific men.
Exactly. He lived the exact principles he preached. And, this practice did not stop with him. The early Al-Bayt, his family, and the generations that followed, they continued this exact same approach to marriage.
So the descendants themselves didn't close the gates either.
Not at all. Ali ibn Abi Talib's daughter, Kulthum, she married Umar ibn al-Khattab. And if you look at the granddaughters of Imam Hussein, women like Sakina and Fatima, the historical sources show they married prominent companions and scholars who were entirely outside the Sayyid lineage.
So for the first few centuries of Islam, this whole idea of marrying only within the exact same lineage, it wasn't the reality on the ground at all.
No, the earliest generations married across tribal lines frequently. They clearly valued faith, character, and, shared purpose over keeping a bloodline biologically isolated.
Man, listening to this history, it almost feels like, well, we're claiming to be more protective of a house than the architect who actually built it.
That is a great way to put it.
I mean, if you've been told your whole life this rule is about protecting the Prophet's honor, it must feel really jarring to hear that he himself arranged these marriages.
It is incredibly jarring. It forces you to confront the gap between what we practice today and what the earliest Muslims practiced.
But I have to challenge this timeline a bit. If the early Muslims didn't practice strict lineage matching, it didn't just appear out of thin air, right? Look at the legal texts in our pile today. Classical scholars did write about lineage. What were they actually doing?
Right, so that brings us to how Islamic law evolved to address changing societies. As the Islamic Empire grew massively in wealth and complexity, classical jurists developed this concept called kafa.
Kafa, which translates to compatibility, right?
Yes, compatibility. Society was becoming highly stratified. You had extreme wealth and extreme poverty. So the jurists developed kafa to protect women, mainly.
Protect them how?
The idea was to ensure socioeconomic compatibility. So a woman from a comfortable background wouldn't be forced by a guardian into a marriage that would cause her severe social humiliation or, a drastic, dangerous drop in her living standards.
Okay, so it was essentially a socioeconomic shield for the woman. That actually sounds very practical for a rapidly expanding empire.
It was very practical. But here is the critical part that often gets totally lost today. It was never designed to be a strict divine barrier.
What do you mean?
Well, if we look at the Hanafi and Shafi'i schools of thought, they do include lineage as a factor in this compatibility matrix, but they define it explicitly as a waivable right.
A waivable right. Walk me through what that actually means for a family on a practical level.
It means the right belongs entirely to the woman and her guardian. If a Sayyida wants to marry a pious non-Sayyid man, and she and her guardian agree to it, they simply waive their right to strict compatibility.
Oh, I see.
The marriage just goes forward and it is 100% valid. Lineage was never a foundational condition for the marriage to be valid in the eyes of God. It was just this protective option they could choose to use or ignore.
So it's almost like buying a car with an extended warranty, right?
Yeah.
You have the option to use the warranty if you need the protection.
Yes.
But somehow over the centuries, people forgot the warranty was optional and culturally just made it illegal to buy the car without it.
That is a brilliant analogy. Yeah, a protective optional mechanism was slowly twisted by culture into a rigid, unbending wall. And, it goes even further than that in other schools of thought.
Really? Like which ones?
The Maliki school and scholars like Ibn Hazm, they completely reject lineage as a factor in marriage altogether.
Wait, they don't even include it as a waivable, right? The Hanafis?
No, completely excluded. Imam Malik explicitly stated that a pious, righteous slave is a completely compatible match for a noble Qurayshi woman.
Wow.
Yeah. For the Maliki school, compatibility is strictly about religion and character. Nothing else matters.
I am really trying to wrap my head around this. Because if Sunni law is this flexible, what about the Shia tradition? Because that entire school of thought is built on the most profound reverence for the Ahl-Bayt, the Prophet's family. Surely their laws must mandate this restriction.
You would definitely think so, right, based on how the culture operates today. But the Jafari, or Twelver Shia school of jurisprudence, actually restricts kaffa entirely to faith and the financial ability of the husband to provide.
Are you serious?
Yeah, they completely exclude lineage as a legal barrier to marriage.
So the Shias don't mandate it, the Malikis reject it entirely, and the Hanafis say you can easily waive it. The religious texts are clear. The early history shows cross-lineage marriage. So how did this become a wall?
It is a huge leap, isn't it?
Yeah. How does a waivable protection mutate into a religious dogma that tells a woman she's basically sinning if she marries outside her caste?
To understand the mechanics of that shift, you really have to follow the money. You have to look at the history and the sociology of the Abbasid and Ottoman empires.
Okay, take us into that history. What exactly happened?
During these empires, the state created a formal institution called the Naqib al-Ashraf. It was essentially a state-sponsored syndicate of nobility.
Like an official government registry or something?
Exactly like that. If you could prove your lineage and were verified as a Sayyid on this list, you received massive economic benefits.
What kind of benefits are we talking about here?
We are talking regular state stipends. You were given lucrative land grants. You were exempt from certain heavy taxes. You had a specialized legal status.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was immense wealth and privilege tied directly to a biological chart.
And when you introduce that kind of generational wealth, human nature just naturally kicks in.
Precisely. Families naturally wanted to protect those assets. If a Sayyida married a non-Sayyid, there was a real risk of that wealth, the land, and the stipends leaving the family or being diluted.
Right, because the husband's family might lay claim to it.
Exactly. So to protect the economic syndicate, families closed the gates. Marriage became strictly restricted to other verified Sayyids.
So it wasn't about piety at all. It was an economic gatekeeping strategy.
Entirely. But, over several generations, people forget the economic reasons. The original context fades, and just the strict rule remains. People start believing it is a religious mandate rather than a tax bracket protection.
That makes so much sense. But how does that explain places like South Asia? Because this rule is incredibly strong there today, long after those empires fell.
Right. So when this concept of economic and social gatekeeping traveled to South Asia, it found the perfect environment to take root and grow. It met the pre-Islamic Hindu Varna system.
The caste system.
Yes. And the caste system already had thousands of years of strict, rigid rules about who could marry whom to maintain ritual purity.
Right, so they just mapped one onto the other.
Exactly. The sociological studies in our source pile show how Muslim communities in South Asia absorbed this structure. They created their own parallel divide. On one side, you had the Ashraf, who were the nobles, usually claiming foreign descent from Arab, Persian, or Sayyid bloodlines.
And on the other side?
On the other side, you had the Ajlaf, the commoners or indigenous converts.
Man, and so the rule about a Sayyida not marrying a non-Sayyid fit perfectly into this imported caste architecture.
It fit seamlessly. The strict endogamy of the Sayyids mirrored the strict endogamy of the highest Hindu castes. It just became a way to maintain social supremacy and purity.
This is a really quiet, heavy realization for anyone listening. What we are really looking at here is a socioeconomic phenomenon.
Yeah.
It is feudal gatekeeping. It is cultural syncretism with a local caste system. But it has been dressed up in religious vocabulary to make it unquestionable.
Unquestionable and sacred.
Right. We can so easily fall into spiritual arrogance just using our love for the Prophet as a shield to protect worldly status.
It is a very sobering truth. When a culture prioritizes its own social standing, it will often weaponize religion to defend it.
And This isn't just some abstract history lesson either. If we look at the clinical psychology journals and the social research in our pile today, this has devastating consequences for people right now.
Very real consequences, yes.
Because when a human-made custom clashes with the actual goals of Islam, real people get hurt.
The hurt is immense. Today, this specific rule has created a literal demographic crisis in many communities. The math simply does not work.
What do you mean the math doesn't work?
Well, you have thousands of pious, highly educated Sayyid women who are forced into involuntary singlehood.
Because their parents are waiting for a perfect Sayyid match that, let's be honest, just doesn't exist in their community.
Exactly. The pool of available Sayyid men is very small to begin with. And because Sayyid men are culturally permitted to marry non-Sayyid women without much pushback, that pool shrinks even further for the women.
Wow. So these women are just left waiting.
Yes, waiting for years, sometimes decades, for a proposal that fits the family's biological criteria.
The psychological toll of that waiting must be devastating.
It is absolutely heartbreaking. The clinical psychologists working within these communities, they document severe chronic depression, extreme anxiety, and total family fracture. You see these intense trauma loops caused by emotional blackmail.
What does that emotional blackmail look like day to day? Like practically?
It looks like a daughter bringing forward a deeply righteous, kind, non-Sayyid man she wishes to marry, and her parents telling her that she will disgrace the Prophet's lineage if she goes through with it.
That is so manipulative.
It is. She is told she will be cut off. She is basically forced to choose between her own life, her own family, and this conditional love based on a surname.
Yeah, when you look at Islamic law, this completely violates the Maqasid al-Sharia, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The higher objectives of the law.
It shatters them. The Maqasid al-Sharia prioritize facilitating marriage, protecting human mental well-being, preserving chastity, and building functional, loving families. When a custom actively destroys those objectives, when it actively prevents righteous marriages and causes severe psychological trauma, it loses any claim to being Islamic.
There is an Islamic legal maxim for this, isn't there? The idea of stopping something that causes harm.
Yes. The principle is sad al-darai. It means blocking the means to harm. The law dictates that any custom causing such widespread social destruction, even if people think it is well-intentioned or honorable, must be discarded. You have to block the harm.
It really makes you think about accountability. If you are a parent listening to this and you prevent a righteous marriage purely because of a surname, and that rejection leads to heartbreak or depression or a crisis of faith for your daughter, who bears that spiritual burden?
That is the ultimate question every guardian has to ask themselves. Are they truly protecting their religion, or are they just protecting their ego and their status in front of the community?
As we wind down our conversation today, it leaves us with a lot to reflect on. We have looked at the scripture, the historical precedents of the Prophet's own family, the evolution of the law, and the real-world pain this causes today.
It is a lot of history and emotion to process, I know. But I want to leave you with one final reflection to mull over, thinking back to our sources. We talked earlier about Jahiliyyah, right? The ignorance and tribal arrogance that Islam came to cure.
Yeah.
If we today maintain a caste system that prioritizes a biological chart over a person's actual character and their devotion to Allah, aren't we just practicing a modern form of that very same Jahiliyyah?
To rebuild your mental peace and legacy today, give charity, sponsor a student, and plant a tree. May Allah grant us success. Don't forget to say, come on, let's go. Don't forget to follow this channel, The Missing Dots. Thank you.